Hello and welcome to Wasted Plotential, where we discuss the wasted potential of our favourite plotlines. Spider-Man 2 was a disappointment. No, the game. No, the other game. Wasted Plotential, pick a different name for your bloody sequel! Spider-Man 2 2023 video game was a disappointment. The second biggest for me of 2023. Its story felt undercooked, bloated, misguided, and was a poor transition into the future of this series. I think the Venom storyline wasn't a good fit for this game about Peter and Miles. While there are good ideas for Miles' role in this story, which manages to make this feel like a genuinely unique version of the most adapted Spider-Man storyline, I just think the game ends up overstuffed because of its presence. Even with so little actually going on with Miles in the B-plot, the plot barely has time to get through the multi-act narrative that the black suit requires in order to work at all. It's one of the reasons Spider-Man 3 failed. The core black suit storyline is divided into 3 or 4 acts. Act 1 is the reintroduction of Peter, setting up where he is in life and how the black suit can affect that, both positively and negatively. Maybe there's a big new villain on the scene, or there's been some recent event that's shaken him emotionally, or his personal relationships are in a precarious position. We focus on that to contrast with Act 2, where Peter acquires the suit and we see the many positives: enhanced strength, unlimited webbing, clothing transformation, etc. The suit is incredible and can be set up like an addiction if that's the direction you want to take it. He grows more confident both as Spidey and as Peter, through basking in his new achievements and, as we later learn, through the symbiote's influence. Some cracks start to show here, either when interacting with his loved ones or while fighting a villain. Act 3 sees us enter the downfall portion, as Peter's aggression and other heightened emotions start to become a problem in every version since the 90s animated series. He acts out with his loved ones and pulls his punches less with his villains. Typically, it's him almost killing a villain that acts as the breaking point, but sometimes it's him hurting a loved one. And we end Act 3 with the removal of the suit. For a long-form narrative medium like comics and TV, Venom typically functions more as a sequel than the Act 4 we see in the movie and the game. It has more time to breathe, often letting Venom's first storyline last as long as the prior setup. But short-form media can't have the symbiote stuff be the dominant force in 2 stories in a row. You can't do Black Suit and Venom as 2 movies or 2 games. It needs to all be done in one so we can move on to the next villain in the next one. Even though we can all agree that moving Venom to full feature in Spider-Man 4 and letting Harry and Sandman be the focus of 3's climax would have been preferable. The game theoretically could have made this work thanks to games not having the arbitrary length limitations of films, but the game has another wrinkle besides cutting away to see Miles and his silly little essay every few missions. This game has Agent Venom Harry as the focus for an additional act in between the traditional first and second. I don't think this could fit into Act 1 without Harry already being around before now. Since we're being introduced to him properly here, we need all the setup for his and Peter's friendship up front, pushing the Agent Venom stuff into a kind of Act 1.5. If he'd been around in the prior game, Harry could have just gotten the suit an hour in and let that be part of Act 1. But with all the Harry setup and the focus on Miles and how the Spider-Men operating together works, we need an extra act, with each act before the final one being a little bloated by all the extra focus. So, by the time we reach Act 4/5, with Venom taking over the city and the status quo shifting into what could have been its own game and actually was once before, we've barely enough time to give the supposed main antagonist a half hour of screen time before we beat him up. Martin Lee and Doc Ock got more screen time than that apiece last time. But what new ideas do we get in return for bloating the storyline with Miles and Agent Venom? Peter thinking the suit makes him a better Spider-Man is a decent idea, but even with all the Miles glazing the game does, this element still manages to feel undercooked. I think we needed more focus on Peter's struggles, feeling inadequate alongside Miles' stealth and Venom powers, using that to explicitly explain his new tech focus, Peter using that to catch up. MJ and Miles think Peter using his smarts to make these gadgets shows how brilliant he is, but he still views it as a crutch. Then the suit lets him do all that and more, so he feels like he needs it. Let Miles and MJ reaffirm how Spidey is more than the powers during the big face-off. He's the man behind the mask, and that includes his intelligence. He is equal to Miles at the very least, and he finally starts to see that. That would have strengthened this plot point by quite a lot. And don't have Peter say he can't fight off the symbiote during the fight. It makes him look weak and like he can't get it off without Miles. I'll touch more on this broader issue later, but here, give Peter more agency. Perhaps we alternate between Miles fighting Peter and Peter fighting the suit from some inner dimension. Maybe we move up Lee's redemption to this point to create that inner world. After all, the Martin Lee arc is the most substantive part of Miles' story in this game, and I'd say the most well handled overall. I appreciate Miles not forgiving Lee by the end. I think redemption plots far too often absolve the perpetrators with a slap on the wrist these days. Miles' response is much more human and relatable. He can't forgive Lee, but he can't keep this hatred inside himself anymore. It's great. And I really like what results from this. Miles helps bring about a change in Lee that leads to him sacrificing his powers to save Peter from the symbiote, manifesting in the birth of the Antivenom suit. Antivenom is Eddie Brock in the comics, but it forms from Lee's healing touch interacting with traces of the Venom symbiote in Brock's system. Combine that with a look evoking Peter's future Foundation suit, and you've got a fantastic reimagining of a comic storyline that feels completely natural and almost makes one think this was all planned out from game one. Why put so much focus on a fairly new, relatively obscure villain for the first third of the first game and most of its marketing? To set up the key to stopping Venom, who is already been set up as the villain for the second. But then you see how the suit is utilised later, and it becomes clear that none of this was planned out from the start, nor particularly well at all. In the climax, Peter fights Harry Venom at their old high school to bring things somewhat full circle after the earlier segment where they go back there and flash back to their youth. The obvious attempt at contrast works. Then Venom sprouts wings because he got those in the comics through a storyline we're cribbing the style of without the substance that made it work, and flies Peter to the Emily May Foundation, which is another fitting place for their final battle. I think spreading these out more as separate encounters, maybe with a stealth segment at the school to harken back to that earlier segment even more, might have helped make the finale feel a bit less focused on epic style over the pre-established substance. Peter fights Venom again and loses, leaving Miles to be the one to beat Venom in the end. So I'd like to ask, why? Why did the team amalgamate Harry Osborn and Venom, two Peter-centric characters, not just Peter-adjacent, but characters intrinsically linked to Peter in all aspects of their existence, give Peter the anti-Venom suit specifically as a counter to Venom, focus the whole game on Peter and Harry's relationship, with even Miles' story being heavily influenced by Peter not having time for him because Harry's back, only for none of it to matter in the end. Peter's friendship with Harry? Irrelevant because the symbiote is just demonic possession that the host can't resist. The anti-Venom suit? Irrelevant because the game's more interested in laying the foundation for the next game than satisfying this one's premise and themes. Peter's absentee mentor status? Irrelevant because Miles doesn't hold it against him, it doesn't affect their teamwork, and Miles is just more powerful and more capable than him, even without having type advantage over Venom like Peter does. If they'd at least swapped Venom's fire weakness for electricity instead of just keeping the sound one, it might have worked better. Clearly, this game's narrative through line should look like this. Peter is mentoring Miles, passing on the values he learned from May and Ben to his protege. Miles is capable of standing side by side with Peter after his own game, but Finn's death has left him emotionally vulnerable, reminding him of his father's death, so he struggles with his inability to let go of his hatred of Lee over Jefferson's death. Miles sees what the symbiote turns Peter into and reflects on his own attitudes. He doesn't want to become that, he wants to be the hero he respected Peter as, and so he puts others before his own feelings and works with Lee to save Peter, cleansing himself of his hate and Peter of the symbiote, while Lee loses his powers and seeks to atone. Through this, Miles has influenced Lee, and when you stop to think about it, it all comes back to May, someone Lee did care about in the first game. Even after she's gone, May continues to inspire and help others, through Peter, to Miles, to Lee, back to Peter, to Harry, to all of New York. Like she always said,
if you help someone, you help everyone.
This goodness rewards the Spideys with the tool they need to defeat Venom, an anti-Venom to purge Harry's system of this poison that's destroying him. Miles can still play a key role here, of course, maybe still being the one to shock Harry's heart back to life, but the final fight should be Peter saving his best friend with this new power that exists for the sole purpose of doing so. He shouldn't still lose despite the thematic weight and the counter-centric purpose of this new power, and have Miles, a character who has met Harry I think one time, be the one to beat him and save him when Peter almost kills him in the cutscene after. See, this kind of thing is why a lot of people take issue with successor characters. You do not elevate them by bringing the established character down. You don't set up a big triumphant victory for Peter only to snatch it away and make Miles the only one who gets results. Again, let them share the victory by having Peter close out the gameplay portion, but have Miles swoop in with a solution to save Harry. Also, side note, having it be the same input for Peter's final strike and Miles saving Harry from said final strike feels like an intentional parallel that just pours salt in the wound. I get that they want to elevate Miles here since they're trying to, by their own admission, transition into Miles being the main Spider-Man going forward, hence wiping the slate clean of Peter's villains through either death or atonement, and the ending shows Miles being capable of dealing with things on his own while Peter stays home with MJ. But the problems with this are numerous. 1. Peter's last game as the main Spidey should give him a big moment in the climax to cement his legacy in the role, which this game fails to deliver on for the reasons I spent the last 5 minutes explaining. 2. Miles has very few villains of his own across all media, with the only notable ones being Prowler, who has retired, and Insomniac Tinkerer, who was not done all that well. So the removal of so many Peter villains from play doesn't lay a strong foundation for the future. We've got Chameleon and Carnage, both of whom already tie into Peter here but not Miles, and Fisk, who had one optional conversation with Miles last game. The only other characters are... 3. The main setup for the sequel is Norman Osborn finally becoming the Green Goblin and teaming up with Otto to get revenge on the Spideys. Otto doesn't know Miles, and Norman's motivation is incredibly weak since Harry lives. If he died it would make more sense, but they saved him from the symbiote. But because the dying person is now in a coma, Norman is taking it out on them? A realistic response to grief perhaps, and I suppose a decent motivation for him to, presumably, make a goblin formula to save Harry, test it on himself, and fracture his psyche. But this is not a good motivation for the main villain of the climax of the trilogy that's going to close out Peter's overarching story. If Miles is supposed to take the lead next time, why is it that the central villains are Peter specific and the side villains they've set up are connected more to Peter than Miles, leaving him with potentially new side villains that run the risk of being undercooked again? Maybe the plan is actually to give Peter one last hurrah as the lead in 3, then have Miles take over. But is there really enough gas in the tank for a 5th game in the same city with the same mechanics, spread out over a longer period because of the Wolverine game they're making and likely others if it does well? They've already said they want to do a Venom game as well. God knows how that's going to work. I really think this game failed to live up to its own premise and promise, and failed to set up a solid foundation for future sequels, all seemingly to elevate Miles while also giving him far less to work with both here and going forward. I honestly think Carnage has potential as a great Miles villain, being the Miles to Venom's Peter in a sense, but I'm not sure the cult leader version works as well for it compared to the serial killer versus the son of a cop who could have been the one who put him away. I just hope they don't plan to reimagine Miles' other notable villain, Ultimatum, as Miles' Clone Saga clone instead of his 616 counterpart, but in absence of any other clear direction, I feel like the chances are high. Also, the Venom sequence is mid. It's too long, and all you really do is just smash people. You're basically Avengers game Hulk. In both story and gameplay, I do not want this Venom to get his own game. If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Today's recommended video is Spider-Man 2 is disgusting woke propaganda. No, I'm kidding. No, it's Marvel Spider-Man 2 was kinda disappointing by Roby, which is an actually good video on the game.